Hello and welcome back to VLGA Connect. It's our summer series Best Of collection, and today we're going to share with you one of the most watched episodes of the year. Back in June, there were 3 panels of administrators in place at councils in Victoria. That included South Gippsland, who've recently gone back to elected councillors. We got the chair administrators together for a wide-ranging discussion about their role. So join me for a chat with Noelene Duff, Lydia Wilson and Julie Eisenbise. I don't know what the collective noun for a group of chair administrators is, but if anyone knows, one of our chair administrators might. I'm really pleased to welcome, in no particular order, Julie Eisenbise, chair administrator from South Gippsland Shire. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Chris. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you. Noelene Duff is the chair administrator at the City of Casey. Hi, Noelene.
Good morning.
And Lydia Wilson, the chair administrator at the City of Whittlesea. Hi, Lydia.
Good morning, Chris, and really great to be with you and with my colleagues.
Thank you all for agreeing to be part of this conversation. To set the context, there was, because as Julie would know, with elected councillors returning to South Gippsland later this year, there's been some discussion in, I believe, Gippsland media channels about just what is the difference between administrators and councillors and what can we expect to change at the end of the year. So at the VLGA, it was thought that this would be a useful conversation to have to perhaps provide some clarity, because people do get a bit confused. And I wonder, Julie, as you are in that position of returning to elected council or elected councillors in South Gippsland soon, is that a conversation that you find people want to have with you to understand the difference?
Yes, and we have been running and running to little groups that ask us to talk to them about what the difference will be and what it's like to be a councillor. It's really quite interesting to see how many people are now starting to be a bit interested in finding out more. We've run a leadership program as well to actually explain what the role of the councillor will be, but at the same time, it's quite difficult for people to understand what the administrators are there for.
Yeah.
As my colleagues would know, there's a lot less of us in the room. There's only 3 administrators. So you cannot act like a councillor. You cannot be at every event. It's humanly impossible for particularly the bigger cities. So you have to be there for the strategic purpose, and you're there to make sure the strategies are implemented and the policies are driving through the organisation.
I think I can sense Lydia would like to jump in there because, of course, while you've got 3 administrators now, Lydia, for some time you only had 2, of course.
That's exactly right, Chris. But Noelene, Julie and I have often compared notes about what is often a miscomprehension about what the role of an administrator is. At times, we've been confused as if we are the administrator, as if we're administration, chief executive role. And then there's other times that people really don't understand that we've got the full roles and responsibilities of mayor and councillors. We are the council. And I think it was Julie who mentioned at some point there was maybe a little bit less confusion when there was the title of commissioner compared to administrator. So from my perspective, there's definitely a bit of a misunderstanding of what the role of administrator really is, and certainly about the full roles and responsibilities of the council.
Noelene, how have you found that distinction in the Casey community?
It's certainly, I totally agree with Julie and Lydia's comments. It certainly has been a point of confusion, and I think it is an unfortunate title, which is the title in the legislation, and it does conjure up a number of alternative roles, not the one that we play. And I think most particularly people see it as administration, as in a financial sense as well. But even within the local government sector, within groups of mayors and councillors, there's confusion as to what the duties and roles are. And I know the 3 of us have had the experience where we've been asked the question as to, well, what are you doing at this meeting of mayors or of councillors? So certainly a lot of confusion, but I think Julie is in a very unique position because Julie has been a mayor and a councillor and now a chair of administrators. So Julie, have you reflected on that comparison? Because I think that's a really, really interesting one.
It is, and yes, I think you're right, Noelene. You've got to step back from you are not. You take the role and all those the responsibilities of a mayor, but you're not a mayor as such. You're not. You take those roles and responsibilities, but you're not in that public. You don't have that community connection that you would have if you were a mayor. You have an enormous community connection. You don't have that, and I think that's one thing. I guess it's something I miss because I had been a mayor before. But you're right. It's a very different role, but local government should be one big local government, and we should all be able to support ourselves and support each other in whatever ways we can. And it would be a shame if the administrators get put into a different box. They've got to be considered with the context of local government. I think that's something we've got to work on a bit.
Have any of you felt as a chair administrator, as opposed to an elected councillor, have any of you felt less valued or less authentic in the way the community has responded to you?
I don't think I have. I think that there is a recognition of the role of the council, and I think once you engage and explain to people what your role is and what your obligations are, I think it was probably more confusing. I think all of us were in the role for a period of time on our own at the outset of the appointment of administrators, and that was probably more confusing for people as well. But once you work through, explain to people the role, explain to them your duties and obligations, I think, you know, there is significant respect for the role that you play, and I think it is quite a significant strategic role that we have, particularly in the Casey context with the issues or the background issues as to why the council were dismissed.
Chris, could I just also make a reflection on that? Because I totally agree with Nolene's comment that I think I've had nothing but huge respect overall, and by and large a real recognition of the importance of the role that we play at the City of Whittlesea. I had one occasion where I went to a community consultation session, and one of the residents in attendance had said, oh, well, look, we feel a bit disadvantaged because we've got them, meaning the administrators. And I piped up and said, oh, look, I'm one of them. And that's the reason why I'm here on site at this community consultation session, to listen to your views. And I feel exactly as Noelene said, the more that we can explain the role that we play and the legitimacy, the more that people do respect that role. And there was a real turnaround with that particular resident when I just, you know, had a chat and explained, and there was that sort of approach.
Noelene mentioned the circumstances around which Casey comes to be under administration. I think I tend to describe more generally across all of these cases that it's usually about governance failings and a need to restore community confidence. How have you found the community understanding the need for that to happen? Do they get that, you know, this issue of governance and it being at the highest standard is so important that these processes need to play out over a period of time?
From my perspective at the City of Whittlesea, 100%. And I have certainly found out from a community perspective, business, members of parliament, but also our staff. And don't forget, a good 50% plus of our staff live locally. There's been a huge emphasis on the importance of restoring good governance and what they see as effective decision-making. So I certainly have found that, and an enormous amount of respect about that emphasis on restoring stability and also good governance.
Yeah, I can't add to that. Yeah. I think that's absolutely spot on.
Julie, any thoughts on that from a South Gippsland perspective?
Yes, I think in the situation that we were in, the community had lost total respect for the council. So you're in a situation where the council, also being not just the elected members, but also the staff, coming to an organisation where they feel bruised and damaged, but you've also got to build some of that respect back again and get the trust back of the community. And that's, of course, been extra challenging when we're in a COVID environment, because you are limited to the amount of contact that you've been able to even have and talk face to face with the community. So I think that's been a real impediment for particularly in South Gippsland. I can only speak for there, but I think it's really been an impediment trying to build that trust again.
I think additional to that at Casey, I've had expressed to me by many community leaders the shock that they experienced once they learnt of some of the allegations, as they remain to be, about the conduct of councillors at the City of Casey. The words that have been used to me have been, I placed my trust in these people and I had no idea what allegedly was occurring. And, it's important to note that these remain allegations, but the undermining of that trust from the community of the council has been most significant. And I think we've all expressed that is a key task we have to work towards reinstating that trust and enabling the community to have a belief that the decision making of the council is in their interests, and having considered all matters fairly and in an unbiased manner, so that the decisions are for the overall good of the community.
So given that, and I can see you're all nodding and agreeing with how Noelene's just represented that issue of rebuilding trust, how do you go about adequately rebuilding trust with the community? Where do you start?
Well, Chris, from my perspective, something that I've done right from the outset was really not dwell on the past, look forwards, not backwards. And I and the panel of administrators in general took that approach. And initially, our focus was much more on really restoring stability, good governance, and the effective decision-making. And also, we've had that overlay of the requirements of the new Local Government Act 2020. So really making sure policies, procedures and so forth were all in order. We've, and I know my colleagues have also done similar, but we've gone out with a 6-month report on the activities of the administrators. So we've been very open and transparent about what we have undertaken, what we're doing. And then we've also more recently focused on the representational role as much as we can. And Julie mentioned COVID. That's certainly been a huge impediment in relation to civic events and getting out and about in the community. But now, again, whether it is through citizenship, civic events, community consultation with the council plan, council budget and so forth. And then finally, I would say that we've got a really clear roadmap or action plan. So we're in place till October 2024, as Noelene is as well. And we've got a really clear plan that we will be reporting on. And that's that issue for us is being really transparent in relation to the work of the administrators and our roadmap going forward.
Julie, you're more advanced, of course, going to election this year. Where do you rate yourself on that path back to the rebuilding of trust in the community?
I'm not as happy as I could be on this, but again, I don't want to reflect on COVID too much, but it has kept us out of the community. And we work across a shire that's very diverse. It's got 43 villages, or 40 odd little places and 4 towns. So to be out and about when we're not even allowed to move out of our homes, it's been very difficult to build that trust. So many things have had to be conducted online. So I'm not as happy as where I'd like to be, I've got to say. I think there could be a lot more to be done in that area, and we just have great confidence that our new council coming in will be able to do that.
Do you have a sense that people are ready to step up and put themselves up for leadership positions on their local council?
Well, this is where I think local government's got to step up entirely to sort of make sure that people think that this is actually an absolute privilege to be a councillor. It's not. It's not somewhere where you can get up and bang your chest and make yourself look so popular. It's actually about the privilege of being able to contribute to your community. And I think that's still missing a little bit, but it's certainly starting to move in South Gippsland, and I'm really pleased about that. It'll be a very positive experience.
That's good to hear. So, Noelene, I guess for you, you've got this added shadow, I guess, still hanging because the IBAC matter's not resolved, and you rightly have to keep saying there's still allegations. How does that influence your efforts to rebuild that community trust?
I think, as Lydia said, we really see that as a process. We don't have any engagement in that as administrators, but cognizant of the community perception around that, immediately I undertook a governance review, and we reported that to the community within the first couple of months of my administration. That was really quite important against some, well-regarded checklists that have been best practice examples within the local government sector. So I speak of the work that was done by an eminent group of people at the City of Greater Geelong when that council was dismissed, and that's a really good framework. I think that the other component is ensuring with all of those reference points that both Lydia and Julie have made about our role, is to ensure that we're clear about what our role is, and we're clear about what the organisation and the administration of the council through the Chief Executive is. We are blessed in having a very experienced Chief Executive Officer at the City of Casey, in Glenn Patterson, and he has been a great leader within the organisation and a steward of good governance within the organisation. And so that's been a strength that we've been able to leverage off. But we've had to think very carefully about what our interface can be in terms of community consultation. And the organisation, through the Chief Executive Officer, has built a very strong consultative framework that we have utilised in the development of our council plan and our 4-year plan. And they're the documents that Lydia was referencing that we too will report against. But we've also, on the piece that Julie spoke about community leadership, developed a community leadership program, which will be a rolling 4-year program to both build knowledge about the council and local government more broadly, but also to develop some new community leaders who may or may not regard the role of stepping up as a councillor as an opportunity they want to pursue in the future.
Yeah. We talked earlier about Julie making that transition from a former mayor to an administrator, a chair administrator, and it is different in some ways. What about, I can see Lydia knows where I'm going here, for you, Lydia, and for you, Noelene, as former CEOs, closely with CEOs, but in a different role, how has that adjustment been for you? Has it required some conscious effort to think differently?
I'm happy to start, and Noelene and I must say, all three of us, and when there was a fourth chair of administrators, regularly catch up, and it's been amazing, the support and the learnings that we have from one another. And really, I've learnt an enormous amount by working with the other chairs. But I know Noelene and I have talked about it before, because I find I can't believe how I've adapted from having been a CEO to now being the chair of the panel of administrators. There are the differences and the subtleties, and I absolutely not only feel the privilege that Julie was talking about being in this role. It's an unbelievable privilege to be in this role, but I really love the opportunity and the challenge. And then I'd also pick up on the point Noelene made about the CEO. The other wonderful thing for me is really understanding, having been a CEO, of the boundaries between the role of administration and the role of the council, and being very mindful that I am not the CEO, I'm actually the chair of administrators. but equally working in that partnership relationship with the CEO and administration, which I also too feel very blessed to have such a wonderful, not just panel of administrators, but also executive team.
Incumbent on me to be very conscious that, having been a long-term CEO within the local government sector and quite recently, prior to my appointment as administrator at Casey, that I had to be very overtly conscious of what my role was. And I had a very direct and open discussion with our CEO on day one that I wasn't aspiring to be the chief executive. And I think there are times when I actively and consciously have to not say things that I would participate in as CEO. You're not in an operational role, whether it be as an administrator or a mayor or councillor, and to be very clear that your role is strategic and policy driven. So I suppose I sort of put the hat on, and I left it on as administrator and left the CEO hat off. I do comment to a number of mayors and councillors that in many ways the role of Chief Executive Officer in local government is one of the most complex and complicated. And I don't say that as somebody just simply who's been in that role, but subsequent to now being an administrator, observing and watching the complexity of roles, obligations and decision making that chief executives and executives within the local government sector have. It's an enormous and diverse role, and I do absolutely praise the work of those people and their dedication in the complexity that they manage each and every day, and the complexity they manage in interfacing with the decision making of the council.
Can I add something to that, Chris, if I may?
Yes.
Because having not been in the position of being a CEO, I think there's a role also for the administrators when we come in, and I hope my colleagues agree on this, but perhaps not, is that in our instance, we had to employ a new CEO, who was in the office for 2 weeks when we got locked down and got locked out of the whole situation, and has done an incredible job. Karen Ellis is with us now. I still think there's a role for the administrator to show some support to the CEO as they go through whatever rebuild that they have to do. And that rebuild might be just about rebuilding pride of their own shire or council, so that it could be just about to the workers, you're the employees, you do have an impact. So how do I support the CEO to get through that process of bringing the staff along with the changes and working with administrators, because quite frankly, they don't know what to do with an administrator when you come in the door.
Could I add to that? Because I would absolutely 100% agree, Julie. We too had to appoint a new CEO when after I had commenced with the panel. And one of the things that we have very, very consciously done is visibly show the unity, because that was an issue in the past, and unity in purpose, respecting and understanding one another's role, but symbolically, particularly for the organisation, it was so important that there were visible signs of unity between the administrators, the CEO and the rest of his executive, particularly given the amount of change that had occurred and the impact on the organisation. And I know for a fact that that's something that has been welcomed, that it is that visibility that we are one team working towards the same end, and I totally agree with Julie's comments.
I think in a roundabout way, you've all answered what my next question was going to be, which was often in the work I do with councillors and CEOs, there's some tension around the role of the council in leading from the top, setting the right tone, at that strategic level, the cultural influence they have, as opposed to getting involved in the CEO's space. Do you think that's the same thing for administrators in terms of setting a cultural tone for the organisation?
Well, we had to, when we arrived, we set new values. We did new value statement that included customer service and respect, and the the values that we wanted to see within the organisation as well as within the community. So there was a lot of direction given by the administrators about how we wanted to see the organisation making some internal cultural change, for want of a better word. But it's not up to us to implement that change. It's up to the CEO to do that. But it's still part of that discussion that would be conducted with the CEO.
And I'd definitely agree, Chris, about the importance of we, together with the CEO and administration, really set the tone. And with the review that we undertook of our code of conduct, very visibly, what are the values, the behaviours, what is the approach that we'll be taking, the interaction with council officers, all of that huge emphasis on respect and valuing their contribution. And even subtly with the change of our governance rules, symbolically in relation to particularly community engagement, it starts to really set the overarching framework of the way that we collectively operate.
I think most certainly the opening issues were important. So establishing the leadership role with a strategic framework within the scope of the Local Government Act. And it's really very, very clear as a reference point that the Chief Executive Officer is responsible for the operation of the organisation and all of the staff. So it was fairly simple to reinforce that, I think, and also to talk about the value piece, as Julie said. So very quickly, we were in a position to acknowledge the traditional owners, to acknowledge diversity, and to make statements about those elements in our council meeting. I think that those sort of symbolic moves set a tone, and then it's for the organisation and the community to pick up that tone. So those important signposts, I think, open and transparent conversations and clarity that the role of the administrators is very much at that strategic and policy level, and that we had trust in the organisation to carry out their operational roles and to deliver on the strategic and policy objectives that we'd set. And I think it's fair to say that the executive take those obligations and responsibilities extremely seriously and have a huge passion for what they're doing as well. They want to make the organisation and the community a much better place. And Casey is one of the largest municipalities. We're heading for 400,000 people. So it's a huge, huge task in terms of making those connections and establishing connections with new communities. So that's all part of the bigger charter.
Perhaps one last question for any of you. I wonder, as administrators as opposed to elected councillors, are there any decisions that you've come across or contemplated that as administrators you just don't think it's appropriate that you would make?
Chris, just from my perspective, I've been appointed in essence for 4.5 years. And the community, the organisation expects that we have been appointed to make decisions, the tough decisions as required, the strategic decisions, and that is our role. And so for me, I haven't shirked the responsibility that we need to really play that critical decision-making role. Having said that, I'm going to be very mindful in that last 12 months leading up to the election of the new council through what would be normally the caretaker period and so forth, just as any council would be, of any decisions that we would make in that last period that will then be binding on the new council. But I can't really think of any issue that we've just said, oh, no, we're not prepared to make a decision on that because we are administrators.
Julie, you're in that position of not far out from election. Does that ring true with you as well?
No, Oh, well, all the big decisions that we've made along the way, we've done with considerable consultation. We have a couple of policies that bigger strategies that we haven't been able to consult properly because of COVID again, and because our shorter term as well. And a couple of those we've said, look, we really do believe this needs, a great deal of consultation, and we don't have the time to do that. And I think to rush things through would be inappropriate. Well, I think there are certain things that we should leave for the new council. Council doesn't stop the day we walk out the door, and we have to be reminded of that on a regular basis.
Anything to add to that, Noelene?
I think I've found the pressure comes largely from the community and their expectations, particularly where residents are wanting you to intervene in operational decisions and, can I say, day-to-day operational decisions. So we've been very clear as a panel that that's not our domain. And I think that's a discipline that we have applied that's caused some frustration for some residents as well. It's also been put to me that some of the pending strategic decisions that we will have to consider, particularly about investment in facilities, are matters that should be delayed until a council is in place. And I think that really cuts through the obligations and responsibilities that we have as a panel to make those decisions on behalf of the community. That's what the three of us have been appointed by the Minister for Local Government to do. And whilst towards the end of the term, you might be more cautious about some of those long-term implications of decisions you make, I think at this point in time, it's really important. Again, we don't go to election until 2024 to ensure that the community, as it's growing and changing at a rapid pace in Casey, that we do make the decisions that are appropriate for the time and have a long-term vision for the city. So they're the competing demands.
I think that's a good note to finish on. I think we could talk all morning, but this has been a really terrific conversation, and I want to thank you all very sincerely for giving of your time. Julie, in particular, all the best for the months ahead as you return to whatever life holds for you post being an administrator. Have you got a countdown going?
No, I haven't yet. Maybe they're doing it on a calendar now, the days, crossing off
That's
days.
a good sign.
There's still too many decisions to be made, so that we sort of really haven't had time to think about that yet. So
fair enough. That is a good sign.
Yeah.
And have any of you had a thought while we've been talking about what the appropriate collective now might be for a group of chair administrators?
No, I certainly haven't. But I do say, Chris, to have the opportunity to talk about our roles like this and to clarify some of the, misinformation, I think is really a wonderful opportunity. So thank you so much.
Thank you all for being part of this program from VLGA Connect. It's been a pleasure and we wish you all the very best. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that look back on one of the highlights of the year 2021 on VLGA Connect. There's more to come from our summer series Best of collection. I hope you can join us again soon.